Welcome back to the Calyx Growing Things Gardens. I am Thelma. And as you know, here in the garden, we try to focus equally on the flowers, the fruits, and the vegetables. But as we go along on our journey here, we get to understand that most of you prefer the flowers. So today, we have returned to flowers, and the topic is Anthuriums. Keep watching, and we will show you how to up-pot and to care for your Anthurium potted plants. About 6 months ago, we introduced to you the larger type anthuriums that we have growing in the gardens. Anthuriums such as these. They're grown mainly for cut flowers, and you'll notice that the leaves are longer and they have a more open habit of growth. But for anthuriums as potted plants for indoor use, the dwarfer ones are much more popular. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at these three that I recently purchased. We will be putting them in larger pots, as well as going through the care routines that will allow the anthuriums to do well in your home. These are the three examples of the shorter type of anthuriums. I just purchased them. They're in the juvenile stage, coming directly from the nursery. And what I want to do in repotting them is to give them a larger growing environment so that they grow quicker and send up more flowers. Because after all, the beauty of the dwarf kinds is that they do produce a lot of blooms, but they will have to have the right conditions in order to do that. So let's start with repotting. Anthuriums do not need soil to grow. So the optimum mix for anthuriums should be free draining. I've assembled these components that I'm going to use to make the potting mix for the anthuriums. And you'll see here we have charcoal. Charcoal, I'm going to put a 2 or 3 inch layer in the bottom of these pots. I'm potting up from a 6-inch pot to an 8-inch pot. So the charcoal goes in the bottom. The main properties of charcoal, it rids the air of impurities. And in our case, we're talking about molds and mildews. Allow for good drainage, good airflow, as well as they absorb some of the extra moisture and nutrients and will release those slowly back into the mix. The downside of charcoal in terms of what we're doing here in anthuriums is adding too much charcoal to your mixture is likely to raise the pH, to make it more alkaline. And anthuriums prefer a more acidic pH between 5 6.5. So we have to be careful. That's why I'm putting the charcoal in the bottom of the mixture. So essentially the 3 ingredients I'm using in the potting mix per se are compost, peanut shells, and washed river stones. Alternatives to peanut shells include chopped coconut husk, aged tree bark, or wood chips, whichever is available. The compost adds the nutrients, it holds nutrients and releases it slowly back in the mix. So let's proceed to combine the 3 ingredients, and you see 2 pots of peanut. That's because we're using a ratio of 2 peanut, 1 compost, and half washed river stone. So that's by volume. So let's start with the lighter material first. That's 1 peanut shell. And you see they're essentially halfway to being decomposed, so that's pretty good. So 1 peanut shells, some of the compost, a little bit more of the peanut shell. You see I'm putting it in stages to make the mixing easier in the end. You could use your hands or your shovel, but I have on gloves which protects me from any injury, any scrapes, so I will just proceed to use my hands. So halfway through the mixing, I'm going to add some slow release pellets, slow release fertilizer. This is a balanced 20-20-20 mix. All right, so we finished mixing, and just as a reminder that as the peanut shell breaks down in the mix, it is likely to take some nitrogen out of the mix until it is fully decomposed. So be prepared to reapply your slow release fertilizer every 2 months or so. So the second step, now that we finished mixing our growing media, is to apply the layer of charcoal in the bottom of the pot. Next step is to put a few handfuls, just about half, into the pot. All right, now the fun part, we are going to remove the plant. And what do we have here? Okay, so this plant had strips of coconut husk in the bottom, and this serves to retain moisture. But in a larger pot, we are using the charcoal, which helps to purify the soil, retard some of the odors, and generally keeps the plant healthier. So it's all well and good. In the nursery, you have coconut husk, but I would recommend, if you're potting up, the charcoal would be the recommendation in the bottom of the pot. So in examining the root ball, there is no sign of any scales or anything that could cause problems, generally healthy. And what we want to do is transfer the root ball into the new pot and place it at the same level it was growing in its older pot. So pretty good. And we just top up with some of the same mixture. So this plant should be very happy. It has a similar environment, just more space and no fertilizer, plus the charcoal at the bottom. Now this one is done. To save time, I've just taken out the root ball from the two pots, and I found something interesting. You notice it's two different varieties. This is a very nice, delicate lilac, and this is a nice peach. And the lilac growth, the root growth is much more vigorous, healthy, and it's the same mixture, same size pots they were in. So for what it's worth, not all anthuriums are the same. This one has much more vigorous rooting system, and therefore I would expect it to grow at a faster rate. This peach is quite healthy. Both of them, the root system is healthy, so I'm going to proceed and pot them as I did the first one. I've already half filled the pots with the mixture, and we'll just be topping up now. And as usual, once you're done repotting, you apply your water, and as you can see, this mixture is really definitely free draining, because it did not take 3 or 4 seconds for it to come out at the bottom. For the first watering, when you have such a free draining mix, it is wise to allow the pot to sit in the water for about up to an hour to ensure that you have bottom watering and all of the components of the media are suitably moistened. So we allow these 3 lovely beauties to drain, and they're now ready for the environment that you plan to grow them in. Of course, you may wish to dress up your plants a bit before placing them on display. One tip is to add pebbles or other decorative materials to cover the surface of the potting mix. Here I've topped 2 of the pots, those on the left here, with pebbles, and the third with a layer of regular construction gravel. See the difference it makes? But this is not just for aesthetics. In addition, it helps to maintain a more consistent moisture level, as well as to discourage those tiny pesky flies from making a home in your plant pots. There are four main areas when we talk about general maintenance. The first thing is the lighting and temperature conditions under which your plant will be placed, and then the watering, fertilizing, as well as the fourth area is the pest management. So let's look at lighting and temperature together. For the anthurium to really look its best, it has to be given the kind of conditions that it prefers. And it prefers relatively cool conditions in the tropics. It's a tropical plant, but it certainly doesn't do well at temperatures over 80, 85 degrees on a consistent basis. Temperatures that's too high, the foliage is likely to burn, the flowers will fade, and certainly would not last that long. So we're looking at anthurium as a potted specimen. It can be placed indoors, but from my experience, it does not last looking its best indoors unless you give it bright, indirect sunlight. So we're looking at the environment for optimum growth of your anthurium being bright, indirect sunlight, as well as temperatures between 65 degrees Fahrenheit and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Anthurium needs consistent moisture and relatively high humidity. In routine maintenance of your anthurium, do not water it unless it feels dry to the touch, about 2 or 3 inches into the media. Overwatering your anthurium may result in sudden yellowing of your leaves and root rots. On the other hand, if you allow your anthurium to dry out for any extended period of time, you're likely to get tip burns, the flowers will fade, and generally the growth will slow. So check it regularly. Once a week with this kind of media should be sufficient, but ensure it is dry at least 2 inches before rewatering. The third component of routine maintenance, we covered that a bit in the repotting, but you avoid applying too much nitrogen or generally high levels of fertilizer. The application of the slow release fertilizer, a teaspoon or so, 2 teaspoons every 2 months should be sufficient for your anthurium. And the fourth and equally important aspect of your routine maintenance of anthurium is its general plant health. And sometimes the health of plants will be compromised by pests and diseases. If suddenly your plants start to look droopy or the leaves yellow, and especially if you look into the leaf axils and you see those white powdery looking things, those are mealybugs. Spots on the leaves may be thrips or spider mites, but in general, any unthrifty appearance of your anthurium or any other plant would suggest that you have a pest problem. The disease problems are likely to be root rot from overwatering. If you see early signs of any insects, little specks on the leaves or little powdery masses in the middle of the leaf axil, a simple way of combating that in the early stage is just to take the plant outside and using room temperature water, you just blast it off. If you have delicate younger leaves, you would not wish to do that because that blast of water may damage the leaves. Another method that I use, which I've shown before, is using a mild alcohol solution, 1 part of alcohol, 3% alcohol in about 4 parts of water. You dip a piece of cotton or a tissue or Q-tip in that and very carefully go in and remove any specks of insects you see in the leaf axil, or use a rag and wipe under the leaves, on top of the leaves to remove that. So that's a mild alcohol solution, but you'd have to be willing to do that for about 3 applications over a 3-week period, and you'd like to catch them at the most vulnerable stage. Pest and disease management in anthuriums and other plants, it's rather more involved than what I just said. And in the case of anthurium, we are already setting up to do a video on that. So look for it in about 3 to 4 weeks' time. Anthurium is a lovely, beautiful, spectacular tropical plant that produces blooms year-round. Now, we use it here in the calyx garden to beautify several spaces, both indoor and outdoor. Now, it's relatively easy to grow, but to get the best results, you have to treat it well, like you would most other plants. The growing environment has to be critical, and as well as the routine management and care, both of which we covered in this video. We hope you liked this video. We had fun producing it. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. And until the next exciting video from Calyx Garden, this is Thelma saying bye-bye.